One man's wrong question silenced an entire hospital waiting room.
Okay, so neurology and the other thing both start with N. That is on the alphabet.
I have never wanted to become invisible so badly in my entire life, honestly.
Inspired by the kind of story you'd find on Reddit, today, a man walks into a hospital appointment, opens his mouth, and somehow manages to mortify every single person in the waiting room before he has even signed in.
Yeah, and that man was totally hypothetically, someone a lot like me. Someone who maybe did not read the referral letter carefully enough.
He turned to a full waiting room of strangers and asked out loud, at full volume, whether this was the queue for the STI clinic. It was a children's ward. I wanted to dissolve into the floor tiles.
Right, so, let us set the scene properly. Our story begins 3 weeks earlier when Sophie, who, for the record, is perfectly healthy, started getting some persistent headaches. Her GP recommended she see a specialist, and so a referral was made. A referral, for our learners, is an official recommendation from one doctor sending you to see a different, more specialized doctor. Sophie had her referral. She had her appointment letter. She had, in theory, everything under control.
I had everything under control. I had the letter in my bag. I had my symptom diary, because my GP asked me to keep one, which basically means writing down every time your head hurts and roughly how bad it was on a scale of 1 to 10. I was dead organized, honestly.
She was so organized, like adorably organized. So naturally she asked me to come with her for moral support, and I said yes, obviously, because I am a great friend.
He is not a great friend. He is a chaos magnet in a hoodie.
The appointment was at St. Brendan's Hospital, a large NHS trust in the city centre. Jake, who had been told the name of the department, neurology, had nonetheless not retained this information by the morning of the appointment. He had, however, retained enough confidence to navigate on Sophie's behalf.
Okay, so in my defense, and I have a very good defense, Sophie was driving, and I was in charge of directions, and I was also in charge of finding the right department once we got inside, because she was nervous about the consultation. A consultation, by the way, is when you actually sit down with the specialist doctor, and they assess you. It's like the main event of the whole appointment. Sophie was nervous about her consultation. I was trying to help.
He was trying to help. That is the most terrifying part of this whole story.
They arrived at the hospital. Jake, armed with nothing but misplaced confidence, led Sophie through the main entrance, past the pharmacy, up one flight of stairs, and into what he believed to be the correct waiting area. It was bright. It was busy. It was full of families with small children. There were drawings on the walls. There were, in fact, several stuffed animals arranged on a shelf near the reception desk.
Okay, so the stuffed animals should have been a clue. I accept that now. But in the moment, I genuinely thought maybe it was just like a calming aesthetic. Hospitals do that sometimes. They have art and stuff to make patients feel better. I thought it was progressive interior design.
Progressive interior design. There was a mural of a cartoon giraffe wearing a stethoscope, Jake.
And this is where the embarrassing question landed. Jake, still fully committed to his theory that this was the neurology waiting area, turned to address the room. And the room, to be clear, contained approximately 15 adults, 6 children under the age of 8, 2 nurses, and a healthcare assistant who had just walked in with a tray of juice boxes. And he asked, at a volume that could generously be described as a confident indoor voice, whether this was the queue for the neurology department. But that is not what came out.
I blanked on the word neurology. It left my brain. I knew it started with an N. I was going through the N words. And the one that came out was, look, it was an honest mistake. I asked if this was the check-in for the sexual health clinic.
I want everyone listening to picture this. I am standing behind him holding my symptom diary. A woman with a toddler on her lap is staring at us. A nurse has stopped walking mid-step. And my so-called supportive friend has just announced to a children's ward that we might be there for an STI test. I was mortified. Proper, full-body mortified.
Today's English word is mortified. It means feeling extremely embarrassed, so embarrassed you wish you could disappear entirely. And Sophie was absolutely mortified. She later described the feeling as, quote, her soul briefly leaving her body.
My soul did leave my body. It hovered near the giraffe mural for a second, and then came back because it had nowhere else to go.
The nurse was actually really nice about it. She very calmly said, "No, this is the pediatric ward," and then she pointed us toward the lift and told us neurology was on the 4th floor. She did not even flinch. That woman deserves a raise, honestly.
The pediatric ward, as Jake has now learned, is the ward specifically for children. Pediatric means relating to the medical care of children. The nurse, a true professional, directed them to the 4th floor without a single visible reaction. Sophie, meanwhile, was conducting a rapid internal review of every decision that had led her to this moment.
I was doing a triage of my own life choices. Triage, that's what they call the process of sorting out which problems need to be dealt with first, like in an emergency department. And I was triaging. Top priority, get to neurology. Second priority, never make eye contact with anyone from that waiting room for the rest of my life.
Okay, but here is the thing, and this is important. We made it to the 4th floor, we found the actual neurology department, and Sophie checked in at the front desk completely smoothly. When you check in at a hospital, by the way, you go to reception, give your name, confirm your appointment details, and they let the department know you've arrived. Sophie checked in like a total pro. I consider that a partial redemption for me.
It is not a partial redemption. You do not get credit for me successfully saying my own name to a receptionist.
They took a seat in the correct waiting room, which had no murals, no stuffed animals, and a notably lower density of juice boxes, and waited for Sophie's name to be called. After about 20 minutes, a nurse came out and took Sophie's vitals before the doctor was ready. Taking vitals means measuring the basic signs of your health, things like blood pressure, heart rate, and temperature. It is standard procedure before most consultations.
The nurse was taking my vitals and she goes, "Are you feeling anxious today? Your heart rate is a little elevated." And I had to explain that no, I wasn't anxious about the appointment. I was still recovering from my friend announcing to a ward full of children and their parents that we might be there for sexual health screening.
Did she laugh?
She absolutely laughed. She wrote something in my notes. I do not know what she wrote, and I am not sure I want to.
Sophie was eventually called in for her consultation. The specialist, a calm, thorough woman who thankfully had not been briefed on the events of the ground floor, reviewed Sophie's symptom diary, asked a series of detailed questions, and concluded that the headaches were most likely tension-related and not cause for serious concern. She recommended some follow-up tests and asked Sophie to book a follow-up appointment at reception on her way out. A follow-up appointment, for learners who haven't heard this phrase, is a second appointment scheduled after the first one. It lets the doctor check on your progress or review your test results.
Dead good news, honestly. I was so relieved. The specialist was brilliant, she explained everything clearly, and I left feeling a lot better, which was the whole point of the day.
See, the day was a success. We achieved the goal. Sophie got her diagnosis and wait, she didn't get a diagnosis exactly, more of a reassurance. But still, the outcome was positive, and I feel like the pediatric ward incident is something we can all laugh about now.
It has been 6 months, and I am still not laughing, Jake.
There is, however, a coda to this story. On their way out of the hospital, they passed through the ground floor lobby, and as fate, or perhaps narrative justice, would have it, they walked directly past the entrance to the pediatric ward, where the same nurse from earlier was standing near the door.
She recognized us, she made eye contact with me, and then she pointed upward, like toward the ceiling, toward the 4th floor, with a completely straight face. And then she went back to what she was doing.
She pointed up like she was saying, "Neurology is that way, lads." After we had already been, after the whole appointment. That nurse is a legend, and I hope she has a wonderful life.
And that is where we leave today's story. Jake caused an unforgettable scene in a children's hospital. Sophie survived both the embarrassment and her medical appointment, which, given the circumstances, is frankly impressive. The nurse got what I can only assume was a very good story to tell at home. And somewhere on Sophie's medical notes, there is a small annotation that none of us will ever be allowed to read. A fitting end.
If that made you laugh or cringe so hard you had to pause the video, drop us a like. It genuinely helps the channel more than you'd think.
Follow us so you never miss another story like this one. There are loads more where that came from, and most of them are somehow Jake's fault.
Subscribe to English Through Stories. new episodes every single day, and every one of them is a genuine vocabulary lesson disguised as something you actually want to listen to.
See you on the next one, and maybe read the appointment letter before you navigate. Just a thought.